with Lesson007. That would be 007, James Bond. Haha. Okay, there's nothing secret or secret agent about this lesson except that I'm going to share my secrets with you. Okay, I set up this position here. Everyone knows this position. You should. White to play, black to play, it doesn't matter. White wins. And the principal point that I would like to make here is something that's talked about in a lot of chess literature, and it's called the principle of two weaknesses. Now let's define that is in this position. Okay, black has two weaknesses. Number one, he's down a pawn. Number two, his king position is poor. So if white to play, white just steps his king to the side, and black does the same. Then white just pushes the pawn, black moves his king back, white advances the pawn again, and black only has one legal move, and white advances his king, and the pawn promotes next move. And if it's black to play, it doesn't matter which way he goes. If he plays king f8, white plays king d7, and the pawn runs. And if black plays king d8, white plays king f7, and the pawn runs. Okay? So the principle of two weaknesses means that white wins. Now here we are at the result position. Let's play a bad move for white. Okay? Now that's a horrible move, and it allows black to draw. Black just comes up here, and no matter how white plays this, the game is a draw, because black only has one weakness now, and that one weakness is he is a pawn down. White doesn't have the advantage of king position. So eventually, let's just illustrate the point to be sure. The trick is you always want to move the king straight back. Okay, and we'll just show that one more time. Okay, eventually white has to go in with push the pawn. Eventually he's going to have to do it. And now the trick here, once again, goes straight back. If you go back to either of the other squares, you lose. You walk into what we had in the first position. Now, all this is elementary, but let's just show it. Okay. And anytime you're going in with check, you're just headed for a draw. And then white either has to stalemate black or just give up the pawn, and the game becomes a draw. Okay, so the principle of two weaknesses holds because black only had one weakness. So I guess we can make a reasonable assumption from now and into the future that any time you're a pawn ahead, you're not yet winning. You need to create the second weakness in the position. So that's something always to think about. And I'm going to just refresh what we did in 006. We stressed candidate moves, and every move that I showed, we discussed candidate moves. Now, I'm going to run through two games kind of quickly here in a moment, and we're not going to spend so much time on candidate moves. They exist. I want to focus more on the principle of two weaknesses instead. But when you're playing a game, you have to be thinking about both. But I don't want to confuse you. Okay, so I'm going to set up a game and give you the backstory on it. Okay, this player is rated 22-21, which is a master. And this game was played about a week or two after the game I shared in Lesson 006. And at that time, my rating was 1976, as it is here. Unofficially, I was over 2100. And I was making my rapid assault to the 2200 level and playing in as many tournaments as I can and could, and I did. And this particular event was an 8-rounder open section. There was a separate 1800 section, and this particular tournament was extremely top heavy. There were a lot of masters that played in this event. I couldn't believe how many showed up, and I was just getting tough pairing after tough pairing in this event. And this is played in the 5th round, but I want to back up just to share what happened in the beginning. Round 1, I played against a 23-12, and I lasted 45 moves. Had a reasonable game, but he was just too good for me. And then I got paired against 1805 and beat him. It was a very tough game. He was experienced. And then round 3, I got a 21-58, and I lost another long, tough game. That one went 54 moves. And then I got another 1800 player who was experienced, and that took forever to win. It took me 65, 66 moves, and I barely won it by the skin of my teeth. Had to out-technique him in the ending. And anyway, I'm optimistic about my play. I'm doing quite well. I'm getting upsets right and left. I'm not being upset. My rating's climbing. Yet I can't make any headway in this tournament trying to win an under 2,000 prize. And here once again I have to play a stronger player. And if I can finally beat one of these guys, yeah, that'll be great. I'll have be in a good position. But it's not that easy to beat these guys. Okay, let me just kind of run through the opening. It's pretty straightforward Sicilian defense. I didn't play a very aggressive line against it. Bishop e2, that's a slow line. I'm not going to discuss his theoretical knowledge on the mainline dragon because mine is vague to say the least. But I'm happy playing something that I'm happy with. And like I say, so far probably book, but the game's basically even. And black has nothing to fear here. And like I say, we're not so concerned about candidate moves and what my different choices were. We're just getting down to the nitty-gritty. Okay. And this, so far the game's moving on pretty quick. We're playing a time control of 45 moves in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then the unthinkable happened. Okay, I played queen d2, and if you look at this position, and I'm not really going to spend a lot of time evaluating it, black is fully equalized. You could argue who's better here. Neither side is losing, but I was sitting there waiting for my opponent to move, and his clock just kept ticking, and he's just staring at the position. And finally, about 30 minutes later, I got tired of waiting for him to move. I got up to stretch my legs and walked around, and I started to come back, and it was still his move. I could see the button on his clock was up, so I didn't even go back to the board. And the time just kept adding up, and he wasn't about to move. And he had started with 1 hour and 52 minutes left on his clock, and when he finally moved, he had, looking at the score sheet, he had 31 minutes. So he spent 91 minutes on this move. I really wasn't sure what he was looking at. And suddenly this just gives me a heck of a time advantage on him, and I have to do the best I can from it. So, needless to say, he proved that his time was well spent. He found a good continuation, and I'm not going to show a lot of variations from here. I just kind of want to make a point. It'll be more clear when we get there to the points I'd like to make out of this lesson. Okay, now he has this fine move, d5, and again, I'm not going to go through all the complications. And then he takes here. Now, kind of tricky. He's on both my bishops. I'm on his knight, which in turn is attacking his bishop. It's tactical to say the least. And I spent right here. I spent 20 minutes on this move, and I wrote a question mark by my move. But maybe it's not a bad move. It's a question mark I put on it some 31 years ago. But bishop c3 for what it's worth, and he came here. And I take, and he takes. Let's just use the arrow. Knight takes. And so for what it's worth, black has acquired the bishop pair. So if anyone's better here, it's black. Black's threatening to ruin the white pawn structure on the queen side, and then have a couple weak pawns to play with, plus a kingside pawn majority. That might be enough for black to say I'm playing for win, and those are your two weaknesses. You have double pawns, and I have a kingside pawn majority. So at least I recognized that I have to work here, and I played kind of a risky move, and I'll show it to you. Okay, now he gives a check, driving me into the corner. And then got to be careful here. If the bishop moves somewhere, I'm going to drop my B pawn, and he's on my knight, and there's latent threats on my rook on A1. So I played the double-edged rook E7, but he's going to win some material here momentarily. Okay, so first step is he traps my rook, gives my rook no flight square to come back to. Okay, so bishop E6. Now I've got to generate some activity here, whatever I can do. I played knight B5, the point I guess being if he takes, I'll attack his bishop and then go grab this pawn, and if I can get rid of all the queenside pawns, even if I have to go into this ending a pawn down, all the pawns will be on one side of the board, and my drawing chances are better. I'm happy with the draw if I can get one. He's, of course, wants to try to win, and I have to respect that and keep playing. Okay, so he came back here. He's eyeballing my rook, and looks like he's going to get it. Now, where does my rook go? Well, it doesn't. I have to sacrifice it. So now I only have one pawn compensation for the exchange, and you could argue that black has the two weaknesses in the white position right now, enough to win. Okay, the first weakness being he's up the equality or the exchange, and the second thing you could say is there's a passed pawn on E6. So in compensation, I have three connected pawns on the queen side. I have a pawn majority there. If I can generate any kind of play with those, that could help my chances. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, kind of an ugly move, but I played it. Now he's on the 7th, and he's attacking my pawn. Now he comes over here, and obviously he wants to checkmate me, so I've got to stop that. And I guess he figured if he just liquidates that eventually he'll find a winning continuation here, and he probably has it. It just requires a lot of time and patience. But one thing that's working against him, which I would like to remind you, is that he's used all his time on that move, taking queens. So he's playing pretty quickly. And just looking at the score sheet right now, he's got about 8 minutes left and still has to make 13 moves. And I noticed my time, I was writing my time, and I was playing quickly too. Maybe I shouldn't have, but sometimes you can get away with playing quickly when your opponent's in time pressure because it doesn't give them a chance to think on your move. It's a risky strategy. The practical advice is take your time if you have it. That's something I always preach. But, you know, this was before I became a master, so I didn't practice what I'm preaching today. Okay, so let's go on. There's an ugly move. I have to hold on to that pawn, though. And I don't know, maybe he could have played bishop c5. I don't know, but he didn't. So he has visions of checkmating me, but I can defend that. So he checks me and goes back. Now I'm happy if he repeats the position, but he didn't. He starts activating his king. Now I've got to get my knight activated, so I bring the bishop back to hold on to c2. Now I can get the knight into play finally. Okay, so anyway, we just keep going, and I'm not sure if a4 is the right move here. It doesn't, but I'm not going to concern myself with everything here, with all the variations. I just kind of want to make a point here. I'm just hanging on. Actually, white has a plan going here, and I'm not sure if you've seen it. Let's just stop and talk about it for a second. What is white trying to do? Okay, I pointed out black had two advantages. Number one, the exchange, and number two, the pass pawn on the e file. Well, what I've done is, for the moment, I've blockaded that pawn on the e file. He can't advance it. My bishop is secure on d3, and my knight is secure on e4, and he's not going to move that pawn. So right now I'm threatening to try to set up a positional draw out of this, and maybe I'm very close to it. Okay, let's see what happens in the next few moves. Okay, Now I just go back. I'm happy to sit there. Now again, maybe he has some visions of trying to checkmate me or at least keep my king bottled up, but I'm able to happily exchange off a pawn and get my king a little breathing room. Okay, so rook f8, and he'd like to penetrate on the f-file, but really he's got, like, I guess I've given him f2 now, but anyway, he took it with the bishop. And we just kind of go back a little bit. I'm not sure if c3 was the best move. I kind of hate to unprotect that bishop, but I guess maybe I was getting close to Zugzwang where I have to move something, but that's not important. I'm still okay here. King d7, and let's see, we're at move 52, and at this time about 6 hours had passed, and it's time to get the next round ready for pairing, and the tournament director comes over and says, "White, seal a move." So in other words, I've got to adjourn this game and finish it later, and that's both good and bad. I've got a chance to look at it, except that I have to start a new game here in the next 30 minutes, but I was fortunate. I had a friend here that wasn't playing, and he said, "Go play your game. I'll sit and look at it for a few hours, and then I'll prepare you for it." So I gave him a basic idea of what I was trying to do, trying to set up a blockade, and left it at that. But now I have to go play another game. And I guess, I'm not sure what rules they had at the time, but when you have an adjourned game, what they can do, the tournament director will ask you, are you playing for a win here or a draw? They'll ask both players. And I said I'm playing for a draw, so they paired me as if I drew the game, but I haven't drawn it yet. And then they asked him, "What are you playing for?" And he says, I think he said he's playing for a win, and they paired him as if he has won the game, so he gets a tougher pairing. And I guess that it's kind of a neat trick to use this rule, because if he tries to get an easier pairing and say, "I'm playing for a draw," then they say, "Oh, you're both playing for a draw. Congratulations. Shake each other's hands. You got what you wanted. It's a draw." So I don't know if that was a rule then or not, but it's an interesting rule. I don't know what the rule book says today. But anyway, they made us continue this. So what I'm going to do is, to get the drama as I lived it, is I'm just going to move on to the other game that I had to play. And now I've got black, and look, whoa, 2256. And I knew this guy for a long time. He was a master 10 years ago when I was first getting into the USCF. I remember playing him in a simul, and we unfortunately couldn't finish the game, and I think I had the better of it, and I was rated about 1500 at the time, but we never got to finish, and he'd been around for many years before that. So I've got another wonderful, tough game to play. I'm just getting thrown to the wolves here with game after game. So anyway, not too concerned about the opening and candidate moves. We're more concerned about the principle of two weaknesses. And in the last game, I had one of those weaknesses covered. I had his e5, e6 pawn blocked, was on e5 now. He couldn't move it. He still had his exchange up, but he couldn't make any progress. So let's look for the principle of two weaknesses here. It's going to take a while. Actually, I played a pretty good game here with black. He didn't really make any headway. Okay, and I'm just happily trading off pieces. It's hard for black to try to play for a win in a position like this. It's pretty level. All white can do is hope to get into some kind of an ending and outplay me. Hopefully I make my mistakes that players of my rating are supposed to make, but I guess he didn't know I was playing some pretty good chess at this time, and I wasn't so inclined to make mistakes. So I guess he wants to trade queens, and for whatever reason I didn't. Maybe I should have, I don't know. And he wants to trade him again. Okay, fine. Throw up my rook if you're going to do it. Well, he didn't want to do that, so I just took it. And we get a few more pieces traded off, and the game actually looks kind of drawish. Now, the interesting thing about this game is we did talk about pawn majorities last game. I mentioned that black had a 3-on-2 at one point, and white even later had a 3-on-1. But here is a situation where white has 3-on-2 and black has 4-on-3. And the general rule of thumb is that 3-on-2 runs quicker than 4-on-3. And if the kings stay on the king side, the the player with the outside pawn majority has an advantage. So that's not necessarily meaning a winning advantage, but he's got some initiative and the winning chances. So is it a weakness yet that black has, the fact that white has that queenside majority? Well, yes and no. We'll discuss that a little more as we get closer. Okay. And get my king closer. Now he decides he wants the bishop pair, but I have a nice resource to stop that. I have a check. And now he's got to swap rooks. Now I get the bishop out of the way with tempo. And so now look at that. Now I've secured my bishop in, and offering to trade some pawns, because for him to activate the pawn majority, he's going to have to push A3 and B4, which he does. And just get my king a little closer. Here comes. Now what to do with the bishop, and I actually found some, I think, clever resources here. Okay, go attack the pawn. And then he says, take it. And I'm sure you're familiar with this trick. If not, have a look. Well, bishop takes pawn. What does white do? It's kind of easy. Place king G2, and the bishop cries because it's not getting out of there. So I come back, and he goes back, and I go back, and I'm happy with the draw here. Is he? Well, no. He's the master. I'm not. Okay, so he declined the draw. And I found this clever move. It guards the pawn on G7, and then now it threatens to take on H2 and then take on G3. So he's got to deal with that. So he offered me a bishop trade. And I guess it's too risky to take on H2 here and give him those connected pass pawns. I don't know. I didn't do it, but so now we've reached a knight ending, and people are wanting to know endings, so here's a knight and pawn ending. I'll tell you a little bit about the strategy here. One rule of thumb in a knight ending is pretend the knights aren't there. Just consider the king and pawn ending. What happens? Okay? And if you can consider that, you'll always have an idea of what's going on here. If the game is a draw without the knights, the game is a draw with the knights. If white's winning with the knights, if white's winning without the knights, then white's probably winning with the knights. So that's pretty much, until you get more into detail of studying, the basic rule for knight endings. It's pretty easy. Let's go over it one more time. Okay, knight and pawn endings. Take the knights off. Who wins? If one side's winning without the knights, then they're winning with the knights. If the game's a draw without the knights, the game's a draw with the knights. Pretty easy, huh? Okay. So now I decides to get my knight back into play. And it should be a relatively easy draw, but me being me and me being under 2,000, I didn't play this accurately, and I certainly made things a little tougher on myself than I had to. Okay. Now my next move is designed just to trade pawns, but what I should do is just keep my pawns over there on the king side intact and not even move them, because real quick what's going to happen here is those pawns get locked up, and you'll see what happens. Okay, H5, and I'm saying, yeah, take my pawn. Well, he's not going to take my pawn, but by pushing it, he puts a little pressure on my knight, and now the fluidity of my pawns is gone. They don't have all the possibilities they did once before when they were all in their original squares, but that's okay. You can still consider this position. What happens if the pawns the knights are gone? Well, it's probably still a draw here, but black has to be careful, because what white will do is at an opportune point is push his pawn on C4 to get an outside pass pawn, make black deal with it by sending his king over to capture it, and then white in turn runs his king into the black king side and starts winning pawns and wins the game. So I think at this stage, the fact that I've weakened my pawns on the black side, I think we can say that white has one weakness has found one weakness in the black position, and that weakness is the potential to make an outside pass pawn. Okay, now theoretically there's a second weakness. That's F6. So white's close to maybe winning this position simply because of the principle of two weaknesses. And there it is, f6 and a potential pass pawn on c5, where black can just sit here and just try to hold on. Now I'm not going to try to prove whether white has a winning endgame or black can draw this. That's not important. What's important is that you realize that you don't want to play your endings the way I did. You don't want to do that. Keep the pawns back. There was no reason to go into this and give myself more heartache. Okay, but I'm still going up. You know, I'm beating masters, I'm drawing masters, but I'm not a master yet, and that's important. You could be, whatever your rating is, you can be beating and drawing players above you, but you're not as good as they are yet, because you're not doing it consistently, and you're not up to their rating officially yet. So we've got to get up to their rating and then beat the guys like me with a 1976 ratings and not let them do that to you. That's what's going to make you as strong as they are. Okay? Not just a random win or draw against these guys. Okay, so now the entire king side is locked up, and let's see what happens. Okay, so might as well invite him to push that pawn and make his pawns weaker, give me a hole on c5 to pop a knight into. So now I've tied his knight down. I don't know exactly why I abandoned that idea, but I did. I've got to be careful. His king wants to run, so I go in there. But now c5. Okay, finally it's time to get that going. Okay, so now two weaknesses, f6 and the c5 pawn. Maybe white's winning. I don't know. I don't care. I just want to show you how I defended it, and we can judge my defense to suit your learning style, and so you can see ways to adopt how to play a knight ending so that when you get in one that you can handle a little bit better than I did. Okay, so I can afford to slide my king over since his king isn't threatening to run into f6 now. Now naturally, if I exchange knights, it's a winning king and pawn ending for him. So once again, the rule we mentioned earlier, if the knights come off the board, is the position a win? Well, then theoretically, it is a win because the knights are on the board. But I have to keep them on the board. I can't trade. Okay, so now he's threatening to come into f6 again. And it looks like black has achieved everything he wants here. The knight's on d5. It's keeping the white king out of f6. It's keeping an eye on c7 if that pawn gets too far. Almost looks like black has drawn this, but white has some chances, and there it is. Ouch. f5. Obviously, I can't take with the e pawn. I dropped my knight. So I took here. And once again, I can't take his knight. I'll lose the king and pawn ending. So I gotta try something else. Well, I go after his pawn. If I can get rid of his pawn, he's running out of pawns. This is probably my only chance to save this, is to get rid of his pawns. So let's see if we can accomplish that. Well, now look at that. He wants to take my h5 pawn and get a past h pawn. So what do? Well, I find my own resource. If he takes my h5 pawn, I'm going to get rid of that h4 pawn. Okay, and boom, there it's gone. So 2 pawns to go, and I have my draw. So I got to be careful. But I have a pass pawn now, for what it's worth. I have 2 pass pawns. So does he. But let's get rid of one of those pass pawns. Okay. Now I don't know. Could he just leave that knight there and try and... No, maybe not. If he shoves his pawn, I'll sack it and start running my h-pawn, and he'll have to use his knight to stop it, and then I'll capture on c5. So I'm getting close to the draw I want. Now I only have 1 pawn to go. And, you know, you can wonder the things going through my head here as I'm playing this tough ending down. I mean, there's a chance I could lose this. It's getting more drawish now, but there's a chance I could lose this and lose the adjournment, and then suddenly my score is 2-4, and I can kiss any chance of a prize goodbye. And even though I've had some great chess, I've got to finish the game off and get my draws. I'm not expecting to win them, but I've got to earn those draws. Otherwise, all my work is gone for nothing. And so, anyway, he's down to one pawn that I have to stop, and he's got an advantage here because he's got the pawn, but can't trade knights. I'll lose the king and pawn ending. Okay, check. So you really can't make any progress here. Now if he advances the pawn to g6, whoops, I get a little trick. Knight checks on e5 and I take his last pawn and we have a draw. So I'll check him anyway. And once again he can't push the pawn. If he pushes the pawn, I have knight f8 check. So he stops that, but in process he blocks his own pawn's progress. And he offers a pawn trade again, or a knight trade. But this time I can do it, right? Okay, this time I can do it. And now I reach a drawn position. He played on a few more moves. I won't show them to you. And then he conceded the draw to me. So, success. Now I've got to go back and finish that other game. Let me get that loaded up. Okay, let's see. Examine. Okay, now we want to go forward about 102 moves or so. Let's see, forward 102. Okay, we're almost there. So now I had to seal a move. And back to this game, like I say, I had a friend that was fortunate. I was fortunate was there, and he spent the whole time I was playing this other game analyzing it for me, and he had it all worked out. I seem to think that I might have made an oops and maybe let him in, but I don't remember what it was. I've looked at this several times. I couldn't find it, but let's see. Just go back and block e4. So I survived the principle of two weaknesses in the other game, and here I'm doing my best to survive the two weaknesses in this game. He's got the advantage of the exchange, but his e5 pawn is his other advantage, and it's blocked. And he really can't make any progress with his other pawns. So I'm close to getting the draw. I've got one weakness. I had one weakness in the other game, maybe two, but I was able to hold him, and he wasn't able to finally convert. So, okay, so we just kind of go back and forth a little bit. And I was even telling him, I said, come on, man, I've got a blockade. Give me a draw. I said, you're not going to lose any rating points. My rating's going up, way up. But he wanted to play a few more moves. So we just kept at it here. Back and forth, and really he can't really get in anywhere. I've got this position blockaded nicely, and you can sit and play with it and want to try this idea or that idea. Trust me, there's no way in. I've got it covered. I think if you refute it, fine. Let me know. I'll give you full credit. Like I say, I think there might have been one point where I did an oops and gave him a chance to get in, and he didn't do it, but yeah, here he agreed to the draw, and I've succeeded and got the draw. So it's been a tough tournament. 6 rounds. I've played played lower players twice and won those, and I've played higher rated players 4 times, and I've got 2 draws and 2 losses, and my score is even, and I'm still trying to win a prize. And my goodness, I mean, 6-7 hours. Between the 2 games, probably 10 or 11 hours of chess, and I have a 60-mile drive home. I just changed my plans and rented a room there at the hotel this event was being played on, so I could play that, so I could get a good night's sleep and come back and give it my best in the last 2 games. And I'll get to the results of those in just a moment. Okay, but just to reiterate here, the principle of 2 weaknesses. You don't have to win every game. You know, you're going to have draws, okay? Even though this guy's better than I am, I wasn't that far behind, and I was able to find the right moves and the right plan that I needed to do to hold a draw. The same with the other game. He was a better player than I, too, but I was able to not make the mistakes that a player of my rating would, mainly because I was underrated at that rating. I was closer to them in strength, but not quite at their strength. But the mistakes I made weren't critical enough to cost me the game. And certainly in this game I was helped by the fact that my opponent had to make so many moves in so little time. He didn't really settle down and find the correct plan, and I had the time to sit and construct some kind of a plan, and that's exactly what I did. The pressure was more on him than me, even though there was a lot of pressure on me. Maybe there wasn't. I mean, I could lose that game and then get pared down again and be back where it was at 3-3. I don't know, but the fact that it was adjourned and I still didn't have my draw just put all kinds of drama on this event for me. I'm trying to win a prize if I can, now as well as go up in rating. Okay, to postscript the tournament, I got my good night's sleep, and I came back the next day and played somebody just under 2100, and I won a relatively easy game against him, and then I got another 2100 plus, about 2130, and he was kind of discouraged because he was out of the prize money. He didn't put up a very good effort against me, and I won that too, and I got a 5-3 score, and I can't remember if it was an overall tie for first through whatever fifth prize, or if we pooled second through sixth prize and somebody managed to squeak in a little higher. I don't remember, but I made a little profit on the weekend and had a pretty decent event, and I was quite happy. Okay, so the principle of two weaknesses, and we didn't even discuss candidate moves, but when you have some kind of an advantage, you want to start thinking about what your opponent's weaknesses are and how you're going to exploit them, because a lot of people don't know exactly how to plan their ending. If you're going into an ending with an advantage, you don't know how to plan it. Well, what are his weaknesses, and work on that. And I showed you what White's two weaknesses were. He was down the material, and the black passed pawn on e5. So I'm sure there was a winning path for black. There had to be. He just didn't play it right, and he allowed me to remaneuver my minor pieces to set up a blockade, because if you recall, much earlier they were way back. The bishop was on a6 and the knight was on b5, and then the knight had to fumble around and go to a3 before it could and defend, so they defend c2, and then the bishop had to come back and defend c2 to free the knight, and I had to go through a lot of remaneuvering, and then I covered my one weakness, and he only had one weakness to work with, and because the position was blockaded, he couldn't break through. So sometimes you got to be on the defensive, and when you're playing a better player, you can expect that. And clearly, all these players I played that were higher, they were better than me because they had all achieved a rating that I hadn't. They were all over 2100, even though unofficially I was there. I had never been published at 2100. So I'm not 2100 strength, really. I'm playing like it, but I've got to prove it, and I've got to prove it by getting that rating and holding that rating. And if I drop it, well, I've got to get it back. Okay. So once again, it's great when you can upset a higher rated player, but you're not as good as that player yet. You've got to be consistent at that rating level. Now, this will hold true no matter what level of play you're at. Okay. There'll just be more mistakes. It goes back to lesson 1. If you're 1400 playing a 1550 or a 1600, and he has the two weaknesses on you, you can still identify your weaknesses in the position and start covering them the best you can, whether it be by a blockade or some kind of counterplay somewhere else on the board. And if he doesn't follow the path he should, if he's not exploiting your weaknesses, that'll kind of give you a clue that he's not doing it right. What can you do in return? So every position is different. So you need to understand the principle of two weaknesses, whether you have them or your opponent has them, so that you know what to focus on, and therefore you know what he needs to focus on. And when one of you doesn't go that path, things can happen, and that's what happened here in this game. He didn't exploit the second weakness, his pass pawn, and he allowed me to in turn come around and blockade it. So once again, it doesn't matter what rating level you're at. There's always, when you're at an advantage or disadvantages, you're looking for those two weaknesses. Okay, so that's the lesson today. Now, candidate moves, yeah, there's tons of candidate moves, but we didn't cover them. We don't want, again, I'll say that, we didn't want to confuse the issue. Okay, not quite done yet. We've gone almost 40 minutes into this, and I want to kind of take this thing to the next level. As you see, there's all these higher level thinking skills that I'm sharing, and it's a matter of you absorbing them and calling on them every move. Because if you want to be a master, and you're going to be a master if you're dedicated to this, I did it, you can do it. If you're going to be a master, you're going to have to do this consistently. Every move, all these things come up: candidate moves, weaknesses, plans, potential end games, the correct plan of even the beginning. Am I playing this opening correctly? Even if I'm out of my book, what I need to do? Well, develop. Okay, you got to think about this stuff every move, because one little mistake, that's all it takes, especially against a strong player like this. You go nowhere. You go backward, because if you don't find some counterplay and strategy like I did, you're just going down. And it's hard to say, really, my two opponents, where did they go wrong? They played very well. Black made some kind of mistake here to let me set up the blockade. Yeah, the other guy, maybe he missed a technicality in the knight and pawn ending, but really they didn't play bad at all. So you can see I had to play at a high level, but it isn't hard if you kind of follow a plan. And I was lucky in the second game that he played a simple opening that allowed me to equalize and trade off into a theoretically drawn ending. He wasn't that aggressive on me, but maybe he was counting on me making mistakes, but I didn't make them, so I got away with that. Okay. Also, like I say, it's my pleasure to do these lessons. I'm having a great time making them and sharing everything I know. I mean, it'd be great if when we pass on, if all of our chess knowledge could be just teleported into somebody else and they would know everything we did about chess. Imagine if you could get Fischer's ability, or Mikhail Tal, or Mikhail Botvinnik, Capablanca, anybody. Well, that stuff's all gone. So all I can do is pour my heart out and share all this stuff with you, because we know that's science fiction. We can't do it. And doing this, I'm getting what I want. I'm getting a large audience. Over 700 people have watched lesson 1 already. You know, if I would gone the route of trying to charge $20, $25 an hour to teach this stuff to you, how many students would I have? I wouldn't have 700. I'd be lucky if I had one, to be honest. And here I could be one of the better teachers available on the internet. At least all the raves I'm getting. I don't know what I am. I don't care. I'm not trying to be number one. I'm just trying to go out there and show my game. But I've got all you people encouraging me on with your kind thanks and comments, and I just makes me want to go back and do an even better job for you, because I know you're anxious to learn, and I want to justify myself that I can teach this, and I'll see that by the results. And the results I'm seeing is, some of you are saying you're seeing some improvement, and that makes me happy, and some of you are saying that you like what I'm doing and it makes sense, and that makes me happy. And eventually we're going to have stories of people I gained 200 rating points, or I went off to a class tournament and I won some money, and thanks to you did this, blah blah. I mean, that'll make me very happy. And again, I'm happy to do this all free, because I get the gratification back from you. And as I said in the beginning, I do take donations. I mean, let's be honest. I'd be happy to get paid $25 an hour from all 700 of you. Who wouldn't? But that's unrealistic, and I don't expect most of you to ever give me a dime. That's fine. Send me people. If you can't pay, that's fine. Send me people. Maybe I can get 20,000 watching these lessons. You know, that's great. And I'm grateful for the few amount I've got. I've set a goal. It's on my chess blog for a new laptop, and they cost about $500, and I've made $60 on it out of the generosity of people that like what they see. Thank you so much. I mean, I can't thank you all by name, but really, that just touches me that you would find there's value here in these games and these sessions, and it's possible. Nothing's confirmed yet. In June, I may leave the state for a couple months and go work in a summer job, and I'll need a laptop so I can keep getting these sessions done to you, because I can't take my desktop with me. It's just not convenient. So maybe my goal will be made, maybe it won't, I don't know, but one way or the other, these lessons are not going to stop. And I've got so much more to show. We've barely scratched the surface. So with that, I'm just gonna, I need a glass of water. Excuse me. One drawback with talking all the time is you get a little thirsty. Okay, once again, I'm doing these for you and because you want them. I'm doing them for me because I want to do it. And I could go return to play and win probably some nice games, lose some silly games, but I wouldn't have as much fun as I am now doing what I'm doing. Okay, thank you so much for your time. I'll start planning Lesson 008 for you and get that out to you as soon as I possibly can. Take care.